When it comes to horror movies, there will never be anything that is more controversial or more diversive than a reboot or a remake, which is where today's movie comes in, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003. Now, believe it or not, it is the 50th anniversary of the original Texas Chainsaw this year, and while I have wimped out of watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the new generation because that looks problematic on a whole level that I'm not prepared to go into just yet, I decided that I was going to do the reboot/remake from 2003. And when I was looking at reviews on this, it is very, very split. There are people that think that this is possibly the best reboot/remake that has ever been made, which I'm going to question. But there are people that also think that this is the worst and most unnecessary reboot/remake that has ever existed. And to those people I say, I see your point, but when this monstrosity exists, nothing is going to top this for worst remake/reboot. And I even have a whole rant review here on my channel if you just want to hear me pull the Child's Play reboot from 2019 to pieces. There was one other review, and it's on Google if you're interested in this one, of somebody that is clearly just a little bit too into Jessica Biel and only likes this movie because of Jessica Biel and goes into describing Jessica Biel in ways that Jessica Biel don't want to be described in. But the reason that I've picked this one is because I am actually a fan of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, hence my little Leatherface here on my shelf, and for me, it is a 4 out of 5 star review. But what's great about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a lot of it is what you think you see rather than what you actually see. And I've heard for this one, it's what you actually see rather than what is implied. So we're going gorier this time. But if you don't know anything about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003, let me quickly fill you in. Driving through the backwoods of Texas, 5 youths pick up a hitchhiker, which leads to a traumatizing experience within the van. The group seeks help from the locals, but their situation becomes even more surreal when they knock on the door of a remote homestead. It is quickly apparent that the residents of the home are inbred sociopaths, and the unlucky youths suddenly find themselves running for their lives. In hot pursuit, though, is the disfigured chainsaw-wielding cannibal known as Leatherface. If you're new here, I go by Hordes, and if you're not new, welcome back. I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, but as always when it comes to watching movies that I have never seen before, I am now going to go and watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 off camera. So that way, if you two decide that you want to watch this remake of a classic, nothing will be spoilt for you, because nobody wants to watch a movie that you've just watched somebody else watch from start to finish, because then you're going to know exactly what happens, and I keep it spoiler free here on my channel.
Who are these people?
Well, Nubbins the hitchhiker is certainly different in this one. He's been replaced by a lady in a sundress who is concealing a gun in a place that I am not about to try out for any money. I am going to spend some time comparing the original movie to this one throughout my review, so be prepared. There may be potential spoilers for the original movie if you still haven't seen that one. Now, the original movie is 1 hour and 23 minutes, and this one is 15 minutes longer at 1 hour and 38 minutes. And I really think that this movie could have done with being about 10 minutes shorter, and I will try and explain where I think that they could save time in this one, because, oh boy, did this movie go on a little bit longer than it needed to. First though, I have no idea why they have changed the Sawyer family for the Hewitt family. Like, the name change doesn't really make any kind of sense to me. And they've changed the location from a cattle farm to a plantation, which has actually changed part of the origin story for this cannibal family. History lesson with Hordes time. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually a subtle commentary on the political climate that was 1974 America, which was in a really bad recession at the time. In the original Texas Chainsaw, Nubbins the hitchhiker actually explains that Grandpa used to work at the slaughterhouse, where he was highly esteemed for his ability to manually kill cattle. Now in the sequel, you find out from Nubbins' twin Chop Top that Grandpa actually left the slaughterhouse in protest when they switched from manual kills to machine kills. Because of this, the family actually fell into poverty, and after the death of Grandma and Grandpa Sawyer, the head of the household position fell to Drayton, who is the only family member that actually had any skills. which meant that the family had to resort to cannibalism. Now, the victims that were killed by Chop Top, Nubbins, and Bubba, aka Leatherface, were actually used to make chili and barbecue that was sold at Drayton's gas station.
The lesson is over.
While this version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is more violent and is more gory, I do think that the soul of the original movie has been lost, along with most of the tension that you feel when watching the original. The first time that you see Leatherface in the original, it is such a shock moment that you then spend the rest of the movie waiting for his appearance again. In this one, Leatherface is more like Phantom of the Opera, like lurking in the shadows and sewing himself new faces out of his victims, while his adopted dad, Monty, is like the fastest man in a wheelchair that you will ever see, and his little brother Jedediah is like keeping himself to himself because he is yet to inherit his like family's murderous tendencies. The other thing is they have replaced Drayton, who is the chef slash head of the household, with the sheriff in this one, and in the original you don't really put together that Drayton is connected to the farm immediately, whereas in this one I spotted a mile off that the sheriff was going to be involved in this in somehow, because it wasn't subtle. It just wasn't subtle in the slightest. You know when a character pops up on screen and they're basically a giant neon sign that says, "I did it, I'm involved somehow"? That's the sheriff in this.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
There is a standout moment for me in this, and that is when you see Leatherface sewing a new mask, which is then revealed later on in the movie, and it feels a little bit more personal, the mask that he's wearing at the time. You only see it once, and then he goes back to wearing the face that he's wearing for the rest of the movie, so no idea what he's doing with the masks that he's sewing. Has he got them mounted on a wall somewhere? This could be anything with this family, because while their house is dirty, it is not littered with bones like the original house is. It's also revealed in this one why Leatherface actually wears his victims' faces, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, if I'm honest, because one of my personal pet peeves is when movies try and garner sympathy for killers in things. I hate it. Like, they're a killer at the end of the day. Just let them be brutal and violent and call it quits there. But they go for the angle that he does this because he's got a disfigurement, and he's hiding the fact that he's got a disfigurement under his masks. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. In the original, it is simply the fact that Leatherface is non-vocal, and he wears the 3 masks that he wears to represent how he feels that day, and the family just accept him for it. He doesn't need a reason to wear people's faces other than that's just Leatherface's personality. But the strongest performance in the whole of this movie is Jessica Biel as Erin, because this girl is acting her socks off in this movie, and I can hand on heart say that there wasn't a single moment where I didn't believe that she was terrified at absolutely everything that was happening, or that she was hysterical at various points, because she kind of sold the hell out of this character. But then nobody really gives a bad performance in this. All of the group, the teens that you meet on their way to a concert, all the performances are kind of decent, bordering on really good, and the same with the Hewitt family. But my issue is the Hewitt family.
Who the hell are you?
I don't think that this is the worst horror remake that has ever been made, and I stand by my original point in the beginning. That goes to Child's Play from 2019. But I don't consider this a remake, if I'm being honest, and I would consider this a reboot, because there are enough differences between the original version and this one for them to feel like entirely different entities. That being said, am I going to rewatch this version over the original? No, and that is what this all comes down to. Which one of these 2 movies is your personal preference? And that is going to vary depending on who you ask about this. Now, the endings are completely different. No, you would not want to find yourself in either of these situations. But I have issues with the ending in this one because it felt like it was going on forever. I was like, is this movie ever going to wrap itself up? There has been one survivor left for 25 minutes now. Oh my god, it is still going. Please make it stop. Like, that is how my brain processed the end, like, 15 minutes of this. It just never ended. In the end, I am actually going to give the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And that's not to say that this is a bad movie, but don't go into this one expecting it to be a copy and paste version of the original movie. Now, besides them both being called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, having a character called Leatherface, and them both being set in 1974, there really aren't that many similarities between these two movies. I like the acting, I like the kills and the violence in this, but I do think that this is a weaker plot, and I think that the Hewitt family is weaker than the Sawyer family, and that comes down to one fact. The Sawyer family are all deadly, and you wouldn't want to mess with a single one of them. But in the Hewitt family, the only one that's kind of menacing is Leatherface, and if you remove him from the Hewitt family, they are just a bunch of inbred people that happen to live in backwoods Texas. If you do want a mid-2000s movie though, where a group of teens may or may not be eaten by cannibals of some sort, I would suggest watching The Trailer Park of Terror from 2008, because it's got zombies, it's got a heavy metal number in it, and it's got a character called Sergeant Stank, who makes people into human jerky. So there you have it, my initial thoughts and my review from my first time watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003. If you have seen this movie, I would love to know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comment section down below. Is this one you're going to skip, or is this one that you would actually be interested in watching? If so, I will leave a link to justwatch.com, as I always do, in my description bar, so you can see where it is streaming in your country. If you would like to know every single horror movie that I watch though, not just the ones I talk about here on YouTube, you can also find me over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, and I will leave links to those as well in my description bar. I'm currently watching 150 horror movies throughout the year, and I am way into this at this point. Or maybe even stick around and join the Horde here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button. Speaking of, I will be back on Monday with another video, and if all has gone well, I will be back with another recommendations list, with this time talking about 8 movies that you have never heard of from Japan. So until next time, bye.